Welcome to GausRoth Tutorials. I'm GausRoth, and today we're going to create a timer script that'll run every minute. And this can be used to track how many minutes the player's been in the world, and we'll go over some other things that you can do when the player enters the world as well. So we're going to go into build mode, and we need to create a script. So we're just going to grab a script gizmo, and we're going to need an object for this gizmo to attach to. Grab a pyramid. We'll just attach this script there quick. It does not need to be animated, does not need to be visible or collidable. Open our script. We're going to change the name to visits. So let's go down to our player events, and we're going to grab when player enters a world. Now we want this timer to run for every player that is currently in the world, so we're going to need a list of players. So we're going to go to variables, create a new variable, set it as list, and then set our type to player, and we'll just call this player list. Now when the world is entered by player, we will just add that player to the list. So go to operator, scroll down to lists, and we'll add player to list. And we need to set the minute value of when the player enters the world, and we need to do that for every player, and it will be different. So we need a player persistent variable. So we'll go open our menu, go to systems, go to player variables, create a variable, and we'll just call this session minutes. Okay, close out of that, and then we will set this PPV. So we're going to go to values. We'll set player persistent variable to, we're going to set session mins for the player that just entered. And we're going to set it to the time stamp. So we're going to go to operators, scroll down to time. We're going to get the current timestamp, and we're going to set it to minutes. If you also want to have a visit counter, we can create that too. So we'll need another PPV. So we'll create new one. We'll just call it visits. So we'll just copy this one. We'll change session minutes to visits. We will get rid of our timestamp, and we need to add to one. So we'll grab a plus sign at the top of operators, drop that into value, go to values, and we're going to get player persistent variable. Drop it into A, and then we're going to change me to visits for the player that just entered, and we're going to add 1 to that PPV. If you would like to do something for a player on their first entry, what you can do is you can check. So we're going to go to events, grab an if, and then we're just going to check if equals 1. So if visits for a player equals 1, we can do something. So go to actions. I'm just going to throw in a pop-up. I'm going to show a pop-up for player. We're going to set our player variable, and we're just going to set this to this is your first visit. We'll show that for 3 seconds because 5 seconds is way too long, and we're going to push it back a little bit. So on this one, we're just going to go 0.5. We'll make it a little bit smaller. Change the color of the text. We change the color of the background, and we turn off the sound and the timer. And if I reset our script, if I go in, I'll get a pop-up, this is your first visit. If I leave and I come back, I don't get the pop-up. If you want to do something like every 24 hours, we're going to have to create another PPV. We're going to go to System, Variables, create a variable, and we're just going to call this mins in. We need to check, so we're going to go into events. We're going to throw an if. So we need to check if the difference between min in and the current timestamp is greater than as, I think it's 1,440 minutes. I think that's how many minutes are in a day. So we're going to grab greater than or equal to, and then we're going to subtract the two values. So we'll put a subtraction in A. We're going to subtract our current timestamp from our player persistent variable mins in, which currently is set to 0 because we're not actually setting it yet. So that will be greater than the 1440. And if it is, what we're going to do is we're going to set mins in to our current timestamp. And then what we can do is show a pop-up, and this one will just say it has been longer than, let's give it a break here, day since your last visit. If I reset this, if I go in, I get this pop-up, it has been longer than a day since your last visit. Now if I leave and I come back, it's not going to do that because it is still checking if it's been 1,440 minutes since the last time I've been in here. Another thing you can do is you can show a pop-up for everybody in the world that someone has joined. So in order to do that, we can just go to Actions, scroll all the way down. Now, there's two different ways you can do this. You can do it so that everyone gets the pop-up, or you can do it so that everyone except for the person entering gets the pop-up. Now we're just going to do it the quick way here. So show pop-up for all players, and then we're just going to say name of player has entered. Go to values, grab a typecasting variable as string, get a plus sign, throw it in string, and then we're going to go to operators, scroll down to player, and we're going to grab name of player, drop that in, drop in a string input, and we'll give it a space, has entered, and then we can bring in all of these variables from before. Oh, that's not what I wanted. And then turn off these, because I personally don't like them. If we reset, now when I enter, it's going to say Galen Moore has entered. Galen Moore is my bot account. If you want to do it the other way, what you can do is loop through the player list. So we'll create a number index, and then we will set our index to 0, and then we need to grab a while, so we go to events, grab our while loop, and then it will be while our index is less than length of list. So we need to go to operators, grab a less than sign, drop that in, drop in our index in A, then scroll all the way down to lists, grab length of lists, and then grab our player list. So now it'll loop through all of our player lists, and we don't want to show a pop-up for everyone. We just want to show a pop-up for the player, and then we need to increase our index. So it'll be set index to index +1. So we need to grab a plus sign, index, and then we have a 1 up here. We just drop that in. What we need to do is we're going to show a pop-up for player, but we need to get the player from the list. So we're going to scroll down to lists again, and we're going to get item from list. I'm just going to drop that into the player variable, and our number will be our index, and our list will be player list. So currently it will show a pop-up for everybody in the list one at a time. So if I clear it and reset it, go in, I get the pop-up Gallimore has entered. And then if we want to prevent the player entering from getting it, we'll just make a check. So we'll go to events, grab an if, then we'll go to operators, scroll all the way up, and grab a does not equal. So if our index in player list does not equal the player that entered, we will show our pop-up. But now when I go in, I don't get the pop-up. If anybody else was in the world, they would also get the pop-up, but I would not. Since we're adding the player to a list when the player enters, we also need to remove them from the list when they exit. If we go down to player events, when player exits world, we will just remove them from that list. So operators, scroll down to lists, and then we're going to grab remove item from list. And we'll just remove our player from the player list. Next thing we need to cover is the actual loop that increases our session minutes. So we're going to create an event. So go to events, scroll up. When event is received, we're going to call this one timer. It does not need any parameters, but we do need to loop through all the players. So we can just grab and copy this stuff from up here since we're already doing that, but we don't need to check if it's the player that entered. And we don't have reference to it right now, so we're just going to get rid of that if. And since we're going to be doing a lot of this get item index in this loop, I don't want to keep getting that information, so I'm going to create a player variable. I'm just going to call it temp for now. And what we're going to do is we're going to set temp to that thing. So we're going to go to values, set temp to get item index from player list. And we're just going to set our session minutes to session minutes +1 basically. So we're going to go to values. We're going to set player persistent variable session minutes to session minutes +1. Grab our plus sign, and we're going to get our player persistent variable, drop it into A for session mins for temp. And then we're also going to drop temp in here, and we're going to increase it by 1. And then we're going to send our loop with a delay. So go to events, send event with delay, and we're going to set timer to self after 60 seconds. And then this will call every 60 seconds, but we need to start our timer somewhere. So what we're going to do is when world is started, we'll send event timer to self. If you want an overall minute timer, so we're going to go to systems, variables, and then we will call this player mins. And then instead of setting just this one, we're just going to copy and paste and then bring in player mins. Both session mins and player mins will be increased by 1. However, only our session mins will be reset to 0 when the player leaves. So when the player comes back, say they were in there for 5 minutes, the next time this timer runs, session mins will be set to 1, but player mins will be set to 6. Now, if you want to do something every 5 minutes, there's a couple different ways of doing it. However, the way I like doing it is this way here. So all we're going to do is we're going to copy this if statement. So if current timestamp minutes minus mins in for player is greater than equal to 1440, we're just going to copy that whole thing and we're going to bring it down here and paste it in here. This isn't going to work. What we need to do is we need to set session mins to the current timestamp and move it down here where mins in is and get rid of mins in. Change mins in to session mins for our temp player. So all these unknown variable players, we're just going to replace it with our temp player. We're going to show pop-up, And then we can just change this text here, grab a value, a string input value, and then say you have been here for 5 mins, and then it will iterate through all of them, checking this, and then the timer will get sent after 60 seconds. However, to test this, I'm going to change this to a 1, and just to see that it pops up. So we're going to script, clear, reset, I enter, I don't get any pop-ups, but then after that 1 minute mark, I should get that pop-up saying you've been here for 5 minutes. We will wait. Now you have been here for 5 minutes. And so we'll swap over this 1 back to a 5 so that it runs properly. Change that back to 60. And that is pretty much it. To go over the script one more time, let's go over to our variables. We have a temp player variable, we have a index number variable, and we have a player list variable. We created a couple PPVs, so under system, player variables, we have minutes in, player minutes, session minutes, and visits. And then for the script, when world is started, we send timer to self. When world is entered by player, we are adding that player to the player list. We are setting that player's session minutes to the current timestamp minutes. We're setting the player's visit count to visit count plus 1. If the visit count equals 1, so if it's the first time the player has been to the world, we're going to show them a pop-up saying this is your first visit. If current timestamp minus minutes in for the player is greater than or equal to 1,440, we're going to set mins in to current timestamp minutes for that player, and then we're going to show a pop-up saying, hey, it's been over a day since your last visit. Currently, there is an issue right here because I'm using if, and since mins in is not getting set, both of these will fire on the player's first visit. So what we need to do is before it gets to this point, we can also set it here, or we can use an else if. Then we're going to loop through our player list, so we need to set our index to 0, while index is less than length of player list, if index from player list does not equal the player. So if this particular player here does not equal the player that entered, we're going to show a pop-up for the player. Coming in, I won't know that a pop-up is saying, hey, I'm here, but everybody else will see that. And the reason I do that is because I have these other pop-ups that show for the player on world enter, and if either of these two if statements are true, you will only see this pop-up for like a very brief millisecond. I mean, it'll be so quick that this pop-up would show, and that's the only reason why I'm not showing it to every player. Then we set our index to index plus 1, and then it keeps looping through all the players in the list. Now when the world is exited by a player, I'm going to remove that player from the list, and I'm going to set session mins to 0. Since we're setting it up here when they enter, we don't really need to set it to 0 here. And then when timer is received, so when world is started, we are setting timer to self, and then that timer will loop through all the players, so we're setting our index back to 0. While index is less than length of player list, we're going to set temp to get item index from players. The reason we're doing it here and not up there is we use temp a lot. And we're going to set player mins to player mins plus 1 for that player. And this one does not get reset. It will continually to increase every minute the player is in the world. If the current timestamp minutes is less than the session minutes, which is getting set when they enter, is greater than or equal to 5, so if it's been 5 minutes, we're going to set sessions to the current timestamp, and then we're going to show a pop-up saying, hey, you've been here for 5 minutes. Then we're going to set our index +1, and then we're going to send our timer to self after 60 seconds. So this will run every minute. That is all I have for the visit script. If you guys have any comments, questions, concerns about the video, or have any suggestions for a future video, please let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you like the video, if you learned something, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you're notified of all my future videos. I try to come out with a video every Monday. Last week was a hectic week for me. We're getting our food truck set up, and then the video I did record had terrible audio, so I just decided we're going to skip that week. It was a very busy week, and now back on track today. And yeah, so thanks for watching, and have a good one.